At 71, long after the roars of Green Bay had faded into memory, Ray Nitschke finally admitted that the fiercest battles of his life were never the ones captured on grainy film or celebrated by crowds drowning in winter breath. They lived in the quiet spaces he avoided, the grudges he carried, the hidden truths that shaped the man behind the legendary scowl. For decades, he was known as the heart of Lombardi's defense, the linebacker who played through pain and fury as if they were oxygen. But even the strongest armor cracks, and Nitschke spent his final years confronting the moments he never spoke about. The betrayals he felt, the confrontations that scarred him, the decisions he never forgave, the people who stood in his way during the most fragile chapters of his rise. Tonight we uncover the 5 hidden truths that defined Ray Nitschke's life. They are not the stories polished by victory parades or preserved in Hall of Fame speeches. They are the unfiltered confessions of a man who lived through chaos, discipline, humiliation, redemption, and the loneliness that follows greatness. Why did one of the toughest linebackers of the 60s carry so much resentment beneath that iconic intensity? Why did certain names still tighten his jaw even in old age? And what truth weighed on him the most as he looked back at the dynasty he helped build? These 5 revelations would explain everything. The way he played, the way he fought, the way he lived. They are the truths Ray Nitschke never fully escaped. Ray Nitschke entered the National Football League at a moment when the sport was shedding its innocence and embracing a colder, harder identity. He arrived in Green Bay as a raw young man from Illinois, carrying a bruised childhood, a chip on his shoulder, and a need to prove that toughness could become a form of survival. What he found waiting for him was a team in transition and a coach who demanded absolute discipline from every soul who walked into his meetings. Vince Lombardi saw the hunger in Nitschke, and under that gaze, the linebacker forged himself into the embodiment of the new Green Bay standard. He did not play the game with elegance. He played it as if it were a test of will. Nitschke attacked runners with a purity of violence that defined the era. His voice cut through huddles. His presence stiffened locker rooms. He became the anchor of Lombardi's defense, a symbol of grit in a league that was still learning what power looked like when it was focused through a man who never backed away from contact. But what the public adored was only part of the truth. Behind the helmet, Nitschke battled ghosts he could never quite silence. His rise was shaped by flashes of insecurity, the pressure to match, Lombardi's expectations, and the sting of moments when he felt overshadowed. The success of the Packers dynasty brought glory, yet it also produced rivalries inside its own walls. Nitschke lived in a world where every mistake could be career-altering, and every perceived slight could ignite a wound that stayed with him long after the season ended. Green Bay in the 60s became an empire built on fear, loyalty, and sacrifice. The snow, the cold, and the isolation turned the town into a crucible, where legends were created, but not without cost. Nitschke learned quickly that trust came slowly, and that praise meant little, unless it came from the men who controlled his future. Lombardi shaped him, challenged him, and ultimately defined him. Yet their relationship contained moments of tension that left scars Nitschke rarely discussed. Through championships, bitter losses, and locker room fractures, he remained the emotional spine of a dynasty. Opponents respected him, teammates depended on him, and coaches valued the chaos he controlled at the heart of the defense. Still beneath the glory, he carried memories of confrontations that sharpened his edges and slights that hardened his resolve. Before the end of his life, Nitschke acknowledged that greatness had a price. The rivalries he lived through, the men he clashed with, the judgments he never forgot. These conflicts would become the backbone of the 5 hidden truths that shaped everything he became. Ray Nitschke never forgot the first professional voice that questioned whether he was even meant to survive in the National Football League. Before he became the terror of Green Bay's defense, before his name echoed through frozen stadiums, there was a coach who saw only recklessness, not potential. His name was Phil Bengtson, the quiet defensive strategist who worked under Vince Lombardi. Bengtson was respected, patient, and meticulous, but he did not believe the young linebacker possessed the discipline required to anchor a championship unit. In those early years, the divide between the two men shaped the fire inside Nitschke more than fans ever knew. The tension began with a simple evaluation. Bengtson believed Nitschke's emotional volatility made him a liability. He missed assignments. He over-pursued runners. He tried to hit his way through every problem. These mistakes convinced Bengtson that the team needed a calmer, more controlled presence at middle linebacker. Nitschke heard the whispers. He felt the cold stares during film sessions. Every critique landed like a challenge to his identity. The young player was trying to transform pain into purpose, yet the man responsible for shaping the defense seemed to doubt that transformation was possible. The divide reached its defining moment during a late-season practice that became a legend inside the locker room. Snow draped the field. Breath hung in the air like fog. Lombardi stood in silence as the defense ran drills. Nitschke was trying to prove he belonged in the starting lineup, while Bengtson watched with a clipboard pressed against his chest. One missed read led to another, and frustration boiled over. Bengtson approached him with a rare flash of irritation, telling him plainly that champions could not afford outbursts or recklessness. The words struck deep. In front of teammates who would one day call him their backbone, Nitschke felt exposed and humiliated. He responded the only way he knew. He lowered his head and delivered a hit on the next play so fierce that even veterans winced. It was a message delivered in violence, a declaration that he would not be erased by doubt. The moment became symbolic of the relationship that followed. Bengtson valued structure. Nitschke valued fury. The two forces lived in conflict, yet they shaped one another in ways neither man admitted publicly. As seasons passed, Nitschke matured. He mastered the defense. He earned trust. Yet he never forgot those early criticisms. Inside him, a quiet resentment lingered, not because Bengtson tried to limit him, but because he saw in Bengtson's eyes a version of himself that he feared was true, a player who might not make it, a man who needed control to become complete. When the dynasty solidified, Bengtson softened his stance, and Nitschke eventually earned every ounce of respect the coach had to offer. But the cold truth remained. Ray Nitschke never forgave the doubt that shaped his early years. The grudge lived on, tucked beneath every tackle that silenced those who questioned him. Before Ray Nitschke became the unquestioned enforcer of the Packers' defense, he crossed paths with a teammate whose presence tested both his pride and his position. That teammate was Leroy Caffey, the gifted outside linebacker with rare speed and instincts. Caffey was younger, smoother, and carried a confidence that made coaches whisper that he could become the new face of Green Bay's linebacking core. In a locker room built on hierarchy, the rising star threatened to alter the balance. And no one felt that tension more deeply than Nitschke. The friction started quietly. Caffey was talented enough to win immediate respect from Lombardi, and his athleticism gave him opportunities Nitschke had never enjoyed during his early years. Younger players gravitated toward him. Coaches praised him openly. For a veteran molded by doubt and hard lessons, watching a newcomer rise so quickly stirred something sharp inside Nitschke. He had fought for every inch of trust. He had earned his role through punishment and persistence. Seeing that role challenged, even slightly awakened, a fear he rarely admitted. Caffey's presence created an unspoken rivalry, one built on pride pressure and a struggle for control at the heart of the defense. The defining moment arrived during a late-season defensive meeting, a setting where Lombardi expected clarity, discipline, and absolute obedience. Film from a recent game showed a breakdown in coverage. Nitschke believed the mistake belonged to Caffey. Caffey argued it was a miscommunication from the middle. The room tightened as both men defended their interpretations. Lombardi watched in silence while Bengtson shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The tension escalated when Caffey delivered a pointed comment that questioned Nitschke's read on the play. A murmur rippled through the room. No one spoke to Nitschke that way in front of the staff. The veteran's jaw tightened. When practice resumed that afternoon, the conflict erupted in the only space where they could resolve it. On a sweep drill to the right, Caffey charged into his lane, and Nitschke met him with a collision so fierce that players believed it belonged in a live game. The hit sent Caffey stumbling. The message came without words. The defense had one voice, and it was not ready to be replaced. The incident never appeared in public accounts, and neither man spoke about it openly. But within the team, it became one of the quiet turning points that defined their dynamic. Caffey earned Nitschke's respect in time, and Nitschke learned to trust Caffey's instincts. Yet beneath the surface, the memory of that confrontation lived like a bruise that never fully healed. Ray Nitschke never forgot the day his authority was tested, and though the team moved forward, the grudge remained a reminder that even champions fear the moment when someone younger steps into their shadow. Among all the rivalries inside the Packers' locker room, one carried an unexpected weight for Ray Nitschke. It was not rooted in violence or direct confrontation. It was rooted in trust, or rather the absence of it. The man at the center of this tension was Bart Starr, the calm, cerebral quarterback whose leadership defined the Green Bay dynasty. Starr was precise. Starr was disciplined. Starr was methodical. And to Nitschke's surprise, Starr did not always trust the emotional heartbeat of the defense. The tension between the two men grew from their contrasting identities. Starr lived through order. Nitschke lived through fire. Starr wanted structure and predictability. Nitschke thrived in chaos. While they respected one another publicly behind closed doors, there were moments when Starr expressed concerns about Nitschke's volatility. He worried that the defense's emotional leader could lose control at the wrong moment. For a player who had built his reputation on ferocity, hearing whispers about being unreliable cut deeper than any tackle. Nitschke believed he had earned unquestioned trust through pain and endurance. Starr's quiet doubts felt like a betrayal. The defining moment arrived during a crucial midseason game that demanded perfection from every player. The offense had struggled early, and Starr, known for his measured approach, carried the stress on his shoulders. Late in the second quarter, a critical defensive call was relayed from the sideline. Starr, noticing confusion in the huddle, walked over to reinforce the message. He explained the coverage shift and emphasized the need for discipline. Nitschke, already frustrated by the offense's lack of production, interpreted the gesture as a lack of faith. The brief exchange turned tense. Nitschke stared at Starr, a stare cold enough to silence veterans. Starr held his composure, but the strain was visible. Minutes later, on the next defensive series, Nitschke delivered a hit so violent that the opposing running back struggled to rise. It was more than a tackle. It was a declaration that the defense could carry itself without the quarterback's oversight. Players who witnessed the moment understood. Starr had questioned control. Nitschke responded with dominance. While the team recovered and won the game, the incident became a quiet fracture. Lombardi addressed it privately, reminding both men that championships required unity. Yet the emotional divide never fully healed. Starr continued to lead with calm authority. Nitschke continued to lead with fury, and each believed the other's method carried a danger the team could not afford. In time, they learned to coexist, even leaning on one another during the most demanding playoff runs. But in his final years, when Nitschke reflected on the dynasty, one truth lingered. He respected Bart Starr deeply, yet he never forgot that the quarterback who defined Green Bay's greatness did not always trust the warrior who protected it. The fracture was never erased. It lived in the silent distance between two men who built a dynasty on opposite sides of the emotional spectrum. Long before Ray Nitschke became the immovable force of Green Bay's defense, there was one opponent who exposed him in a way he never forgot. That opponent was Jim Taylor, the bruising Packers fullback, whose punishing runs carved a place in league history. Taylor was relentless, fearless, and built like a battering ram. He trained with fury and played with a single-minded hunger that matched Nitschke's own intensity. Yet, despite sharing the same uniform, their battles were some of the most violent clashes ever witnessed in Green Bay practices. And, for Nitschke, the memory of being overpowered by a teammate burned deeper than any hit he delivered on Sundays. The roots of their tension were practical at first. Lombardi believed in sharpening iron with iron, so he designed practices that pushed offense and defense into direct conflict. Taylor loved the challenge. Nitschke demanded it. But as Taylor's stature grew, whispers began to echo through the organization. Whispers that Taylor had once pancaked Nitschke so violently that the linebacker needed help getting back to his feet. For a man who built his identity on ferocity, such humiliation felt like a wound he could not allow to heal. Taylor insisted the hit was part of competition. Nitschke saw it as a question of dominance. The unspoken rivalry between them simmered beneath every drill and every film session. The defining moment came during a notorious goal line practice that teammates later described as the closest thing to war they ever experienced. Lombardi placed the ball inches from the end zone and demanded that neither side yield. On the first snap, Nitschke met Taylor head-on. The collision cracked through the cold air. Taylor drove forward, refusing to fall. Nitschke dug deeper, but the fullback's power won the first battle. The offensive sideline erupted. Nitschke's pride ignited. On the next play, Lombardi barked for the same call. Taylor lowered his shoulder. Nitschke launched himself with a violence that belonged on a battlefield. This time, Taylor stopped dead. Helmets collided. Bodies shook. The field fell silent as both men stood locked in the kind of confrontation that defined their era. Teammates would remember the moment for years. It was not just football. It was two forces testing the limits of each other's will. While they grew to respect one another, neither man forgot that day. Taylor understood that defeating Nitschke even once carried consequences. Nitschke carried the memory of being driven backward, like a scar carved into his sense of identity. Their rivalry never turned into hatred, but it lived as a constant reminder that even the strongest warrior can be humbled. Ray Nitschke never forgot the fullback who once overpowered him in front of his teammates. And though he admired Jim Taylor, the sting of that moment kept the rivalry alive long after the cheering stopped. Among all the figures who shaped Ray Nitschke's life, no one carved deeper wounds or left heavier shadows than Vince Lombardi. Fans remember a legendary partnership built on discipline and championships, but the truth was far more complicated. Lombardi pushed Nitschke harder than almost any player on the roster. He saw raw power wrapped in emotional instability. He saw greatness buried beneath rage, and he believed that the only way to unleash Nitschke's potential was to break him first. Their relationship became the defining storm of Nitschke's career, one filled with loyalty, humiliation, admiration, and resentment. The conflict began with Lombardi's belief that Nitschke needed control more than encouragement. The coach demanded perfection. He punished mistakes publicly. He pushed Nitschke through drills long after others had left the field. When film exposed a misread or a missed tackle, Lombardi's voice cut through the room with surgical intensity. He singled out Nitschke, repeatedly convinced that pressure would harden him. Players whispered that Lombardi rode him harder than anyone else. Nitschke felt it too. He believed in discipline. He respected structure. But he never forgot the sting of being singled out, especially when he felt he had given everything he had. The emotional weight of Lombardi's expectations shaped him, but it also carved resentments he rarely admitted, even to teammates. The defining moment came during a celebrated but brutal training camp practice. The heat pressed against the field like a furnace. The team was exhausted. Lombardi demanded another round of inside running drills, a session known for producing collisions that echoed through bleachers. On the first play, Nitschke misread the guard's angle and arrived late. Lombardi erupted, calling him out in front of the entire roster. The coach demanded the drill be repeated. Nitschke reset. Sweat stung his eyes. The ball snapped. Another misstep. Lombardi shouted again, his words slicing into the linebacker's pride. Teammates watched uneasily as Nitschke's frustration escalated. On the third attempt, Nitschke exploded into the runner with a hit so fierce that coaches flinched. The runner collapsed. The field went silent. Lombardi walked toward Nitschke, slowly staring at him with a mixture of fury and approval. Then, in front of everyone, he delivered a rare compliment. It was brief, almost gruff. But to Nitschke, it felt like the first breath after drowning. The moment became legendary within the team. Lombardi had broken him down and rebuilt him in a single afternoon. Yet the emotional cost never vanished. Nitschke loved Lombardi. He admired his brilliance. He cherished the championships they built together. But he also carried the pain of those confrontations, the private doubts, the public criticisms that left him exposed, the feeling that he was always one mistake away from losing everything he had fought for. Ray Nitschke never escaped Lombardi's shadow. The coach made him a champion, but he also left scars that followed him through every season and into every quiet hour of his final years. Their bond defined his greatness, yet it lived forever as the deepest conflict he carried. Long before Ray Nitschke carved his legacy into Green Bay history, he shared a bond with a teammate who understood his struggle better than most. That teammate was Henry Jordan, the smooth-talking defensive tackle whose smile often disarmed even the toughest men in the locker room. Jordan and Nitschke were opposites. Nitschke lived in fire. Jordan lived in ease. Yet their contrast made them close, at least for a time. Jordan admired Nitschke's ferocity. Nitschke respected Jordan's calm strength. Their friendship seemed unbreakable until one moment revealed a truth that haunted Nitschke, far more than any rivalry on the field. The tension began when Jordan emerged as a media favorite. Reporters gravitated toward his humor, his polished interviews, and his ability to charm even the harshest critics. As the Packers dynasty grew, Jordan's spotlight expanded. Nitschke, who had always fought for recognition through violence and sacrifice, noticed how effortlessly praise flowed toward his friend. The disparity stirred something uncomfortable inside him. He would never admit it aloud, but Jordan reminded him of the one thing he feared. That skill and personality might outweigh toughness. That grace might overshadow grit. The defining moment arrived after a late-season victory when reporters surrounded Jordan while Nitschke stood nearby, unnoticed. Jordan cracked jokes. The room erupted in laughter, and Nitschke felt a quiet sting, not jealousy, something more painful, a reminder that his path required suffering while others seemed to glide with ease. The moment fractured their closeness. They remained teammates. They remained allies. But the distance between them grew subtle yet permanent. Henry Jordan never meant to wound him, but he became the living reflection of Nitschke's deepest fear. That greatness could come without pain. And for a man built on struggle, that truth lingered like a shadow he never escaped. Ray Nitschke's life was shaped as much by conflict as it was by triumph. The frozen fields of Green Bay made him a champion, but the hidden truths buried beneath his rise told a deeper story. Each rivalry carried a lesson. Each confrontation left a mark. And each scar revealed something about the man who built his legacy in a world where pain, pride, and discipline formed an unbreakable chain. Through his early years, the doubt from Phil Bengtson became the quiet engine that pushed him toward greatness. Nitschke never forgot the nights he replayed those criticisms in his mind, using them as fuel to prove he belonged in the middle of one of the NFL's fiercest defenses. That early conflict carved the two sides of his identity: the young player who feared failure and the hardened veteran who vowed no one would ever question him again. Bengtson helped shape the linebacker the world admired, even if the relationship left a bruise that never healed. The challenge from Leroy Caffey reinforced another truth. Greatness demands constant vigilance. Nitschke knew the NFL was becoming faster and younger, and his clash with Caffey reminded him that leadership must be defended, not inherited. Their collision during that tense practice became a turning point. It fortified Nitschke's resolve, but it also reminded him that authority is fragile. He realized that even inside a dynasty, rivalries could bloom in silence. Trust could fracture without warning, and a single moment of challenge could test the foundation of everything he built. His silent rift with Bart Starr revealed a different layer of conflict, not physical, not loud, but rooted in the emotional distance between two men, burdened with carrying an empire. Starr protected order. Nitschke protected fire. Together they formed a balance that powered championships, yet the strain between their personalities became a symbol of the tension required to maintain greatness. For Nitschke, the absence of complete trust from Starr left a small but lasting ache. It proved that even inside victory, isolation remained. Even among champions, not every bond becomes unbreakable. His rivalry with Jim Taylor became the raw reminder that physical dominance could shift without warning, that even the strongest warrior could be humbled. For Nitschke, Taylor represented the one thing he never wanted to acknowledge: vulnerability. Their collisions turned into a personal battle for identity, and the sting of that early humiliation stayed with him long after their careers ended. Yet it also strengthened him. Taylor's power forced him to evolve, to sharpen his discipline, to embrace the pain that forged his reputation. What could have been a wound became a catalyst, though it never stopped haunting him. Then came Henry Jordan, the friend who turned into a mirror, the man whose natural confidence and effortless charm created a contrast Nitschke struggled to accept. Jordan's rise in the public eye forced Nitschke to confront a painful truth. Not all success is earned the same way. Some men are celebrated because their spirit is light, some because their stories are joyful. Nitschke's path was neither. His journey was built on struggle, discipline, and scars. Seeing Jordan praised for qualities he never possessed reminded him of the parts of himself he wished he could change, but never could. When viewed separately, these conflicts seem like fragments of a turbulent career, but together they reveal the framework of Nitschke's legacy. He was a man forged inside a relentless environment, a leader shaped by the pressure of expectations, a warrior who converted doubt into strength, a soul who carried every slight, every criticism, and every challenge like weights that hardened his resolve. His greatness did not grow from moments of ease. It grew from the fractures that demanded he rise again and again. The Packers dynasty of the 60s was built on unity, but that unity was born from struggle. Nitschke lived at the center of that storm. He became the emotional gravity of a team that balanced discipline with violence. Without his intensity, their defense lacked fire. Without his resilience, their standard of excellence would have been weaker. His presence created fear in opponents, but also stability among teammates who trusted him to control the chaos that defined their era. Yet the quiet truth is that the conflicts shaping him did not disappear when the championships ended. As he aged, Nitschke reflected on the men who molded his path. Some pushed him, some challenged him, some wounded him without meaning to. And one coach changed him forever. In his final years, he acknowledged that Lombardi remained the shadow he could never escape. Their relationship defined everything: the pain, the pride, the transformation, the legacy. Ray Nitschke died in 1998 at the age of 61, and in the years since his story has shifted from a portrait of fury to a testament of resilience. His 5 hidden truths reveal not flaws but foundations. They show that greatness is not polished. It is carved. It is bruised. It is tested in moments the world never sees. Beyond trophies, beyond iconic photographs, beyond the roar of winter crowds, Ray Nitschke's legacy lives in the truth he carried, that the battles within shape a champion more profoundly than the victories outside. Ray Nitschke's journey through doubt, confrontation, and inner turmoil reveals a truth that every fan of football's golden age understands. Greatness is never a straight path. It bends under pressure. It fractures under expectation. It grows through the people who test us in ways the world never sees. Nitschke lived through rivalries that shaped his identity, friendships that exposed his insecurities, and mentorship that hardened him into the warrior who anchored Green Bay's dynasty. His story forces us to confront a simple question: what truly defines a legend? The moments that earn applause, or the hidden truths that he carried in silence? As you reflect on these 5 revelations, think about the conflict that surprised you most. Was it the coach who doubted him? The teammate who challenged his authority? The quarterback who questioned his stability? The rival who once overpowered him? Or the friend who reminded him of the pain beneath his toughness? Each confrontation tells a part of the story, but only you can decide which truth cut the deepest. If you love uncovering the untold conflicts, dark corners, and emotional battles that shaped football's greatest icons, then this is your place. Every week, we reveal hidden layers of the legends who built the sport, from grit, fear, and unbreakable resolve. There are countless rivalries left to explore, and many more truths waiting beneath the surface. Tell us in the comments which moment from Nitschke's story changed the way you see him. And if you want more documentaries about the men who defined football's toughest era, subscribe to NFL Hidden Truths. The past still has secrets to share, and we are here to uncover them.